Let me introduce myself. My name is Wayne Gray. I'm a member of First Presbyterian Church and a native with family history back to 1742 in Horry County. I just got a brief introduction. I want to recognize three folks. Then I'm going to share with you a story or two, and then we're going to turn it over to Diane Devon Stokes and, of course, Egerton Burroughs, who both need no introduction. But first, this series tonight is a part of the Through the Lens of History series, which is sponsored by Chapin Memorial Library. It's in its second season. The next speaker is May 15th at 2 p.m. at the Chapin Library, which is Bo Bryan. There's Bo right there. So I encourage you to go to that one. You're going to learn a lot about the underbelly of Myrtle Beach. Is that right, Bo? But Jennifer Nasser is the director of Chapin Memorial Library, and I want her to stand. I'm not sure where she is, and I want you to give her a round of applause. Jennifer, there she is in the back of the sanctuary. Jennifer, thank you for what you do. The library is a jewel and a charm of an institution of our community, which we can thank the Burroughs and Chapin family for that great asset that we have in our community. Tonight's event is a spinoff of the Through the Lens of History series that Tina Corley, who is the chairperson of the Friends of the Chapin Library Board, has helped orchestrate and sponsor. This is the second event. The first event earlier this year was an evening at the Ocean Forest Hotel. And I want to tell you that just today, the Horry County Historical Preservation Committee is going to recognize that event and receive an award for preserving history in Horry County. So Tina Corley, you get to stand and we get to give you an applause. Now, Diane Devon Stokes, who's going to MC this event. I asked her before I took the microphone, could I say this? But it was in print last week. Many of you may know this. For 51 years, her grace, her beauty, and her voice has represented the city of Myrtle Beach, the Myrtle Beach Area Chamber of Commerce, Chapin Company, the Sun Fund Festival, the arts, which she has a strong passion for. And for that work, she was honored with was the recipient of this year's Ashby Ward Pioneer of the Year Award. Please give a round of applause for her work. How many of you, by a show of hands, went to the Pavilion? Everybody. I want to thank you for your attendance tonight, but before I move on, also, I need to tell you, on behalf of our senior pastor, Dr. John Brierley, he and our session and our congregation welcome you to this magnificent facility. When the steering committee and designed this campus over 20 years ago, one of the visions of this facility was to be able to host events like this, beyond it just hosting, just having services here on Sunday or Wednesday where they may be ever. So to the session and to you, John, thank you for allowing us to be here tonight. It really, when I was asked by Tina to do a little introduction, it really truly is an honor. Many of you may know this, but I'm going to take a little bit of liberty just for a minute and share something. And Egerton, I want to tell you and all of the family members of the Burroughs and Chapin family, I come from the Todd Nance Gray family tree. My great-great-grandfather, Erasmus Todd, located to the Witherswash area in the 1870s from Highway 90. He would have been and did trade with and do business with and know Franklin G. Burroughs. My great-grandfather, Daniel Wayne Nance, was a compatriot of Mr. Chapin. He was a master builder and would have bought property from Burroughs and Collins, Myrtle Beach Farms, or Burroughs and Chapin. Thank goodness for the Chapin Company that supplied him the materials and whatever else he needed during the winter to build many of the residences and commercial buildings that are in the area of downtown Myrtle Beach now, where we see the Arts and Innovation District. My grandfather, Phil Gray, started a company called eventually named Grayco Steel, of which my dad and my uncle Bob Gray, and Bob is here with us tonight, operated and owned. And in 1977-78, they had the responsibility of deconstructing the corkscrew from Magic Harbor and relocating that to the Pavilion site, which became, an iconic ride at the Myrtle Beach Pavilion. And like many of you, I worked at the Myrtle Beach Pavilion for 5 years and had a great time in its heyday in the late 80s when it was at its largest expansion from Ocean Boulevard always to King Highway. And like many of you, I experienced most of my first at the Myrtle Beach Pavilion. Your first date, your first kiss, your first corn dog, maybe the first time you throw up after you got off of the roller coaster, and probably a lot of other firsts that can't be mentioned here in this building. But ladies and gentlemen, enjoy yourselves tonight, relax. It's going to be a fun evening, and let's reminisce about the history and the joy and the happiness that we all experienced at the Myrtle Beach Pavilion. I give you Diane Devon Stokes.
Thank you, Wayne. Seeing all of you come in tonight, it's like old family week, like a family reunion. All the hugs were so meaningful, and I know Egerton appreciates your attendance here this evening. 3 quick things, and then we'll turn it over to the man of the hour. 1, please turn off your cell phones, please, because we're videoing this, and we don't want phones ringing every 5 minutes. Number 2, the video that you were watching is called the Chairman's Cut of the Myrtle Beach Pavilion. If you've ever purchased the Myrtle Beach Pavilion documentary before, which I'm proud to say Chuck and I produced on the final day of the pavilion, there is a Chairman's Cut that was made especially for Egerton. And so what they will be selling tonight, when you leave here in the vestibule of our church, you'll be able to purchase the video for $25, and all the proceeds benefit our Chapin Memorial Library. And it's the Chairman's Cut. It's about 45 minutes, and it's extra special. Also, when Egerton is done speaking, we will have a question and answer period. There'll be volunteers in the aisles, and they'll have a microphone, and we'll pass the microphone to you so we can all hear you ask your questions. So I think it's time to introduce the man of the hour. And so when you ask Egerton Burroughs, what should I say about you, Egerton? I could speak for 2 hours on your introductions. And you know what he said? Well, if they didn't know me well enough, they shouldn't even be here. So most of you could probably tell stories that would be even better than what I might say about Egerton, and I'm sure that's the case. But ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming an incredible man, an incredible supporter of our community, Mr. Egerton Burroughs.
Okay. You're using that microphone.
Is it on now? Thank you. Thank you, Tina. Thank you for the Chapin Library. Thank you for the folks here at the church for letting us be here tonight. Wayne, thank you for the introduction, a little dose of history and memories. It's kind of an emotional time for me tonight as I've been reflecting on things, and I'm going to try to put them all together. And have a little patience, and we'll get through the evening. And I'm going to start out kind of where we did it the last time we were together. We're going to talk about the old days when the pavilion, the last one, burnt. We talked about Conway a little bit in the history, the railroads, the steamboats. We talked about Conway, and particularly about me growing up in Conway. I was blessed to live in a neighborhood that was a little unusual. My grandfather, Don, lived across the street. We called him Pa. His father was a soldier in the Civil War. Some call it the War of Northern Aggression. But in those days, the Civil War was on the front burner. In that neighborhood was his sister, Effie, Aunt Lucille, Aunt Bess. There was Aunt Frances there. Her husband was one of my grandfather's brothers, Arthur, and he was killed when a turpentine still blew up and burnt him badly, and he died. But I got to talk with Aunt Frances. The oldest son, Frank, was dead at this time. I never really got to know him. But by talking with Aunt Effie, Aunt Bess, Aunt Frances, my grandfather, I kind of heard it all. My grandfather and I developed a very special and unusual relationship. We shared stories from the time that I can just remember walking to the times that he would take turns sometime driving us to the mountains. In the early days, they sent the women and the children to the mountains. They thought it would keep them from getting polio. The vaccine hadn't come out. So the men shuffled back and forth, and sometimes I got to ride with Pa, as I call him, and he would tell me stories. As I grew up in high school, elementary school, that relationship got better and better. He told me about battles in the Civil War, Chickamauga. He told me where his daddy was captured and taken to the camp up in Chicago, the prison camp, how he got back. He took me to the battlefields. He took me to the tobacco warehouses down by the old buildings, shared stories. I got sick one time in college. He came to Chattanooga with my mother. As I started working in the companies, he was always around smoking his pipe. He'd walk through Jerry Cox, Burroughs Collins, Chapin Company, wherever. You knew he was there, you could smell his pipe before he got there. But he told stories about things that happened in his early days in the company and through his eyes. He was always an honorable man. He was very quiet, soft-spoken. He never put any stars in his crown. He was always crowning somebody else. So I'm trying to tell you a little bit about my granddaddy and our relationship. And now I'm going to start my story, which he was an integral part of. I grew up in Conway, as I said, and we talked about steamboats and things like that. And I wanted to catch a couple of things I didn't bring up last time. I think I forgot them. One was when the steamboats went to Georgetown and unloaded the turpentine and lumber and things. They picked up ice. Ice was used as ballast on the sailboats, bringing them down when they were pretty empty, and then they filled it up, but the ice was taken back to Conway on boats and other places and put in little buildings that were made out of sawdust and board. And those were the ice houses. I think I left that off. The other story ties into my grandfather and how reserved and quiet he always was and soft-spoken. And when my grandmother, Miss Georgie, would get upset, she would tell the story about Mr. Durney instead of Mr. Don or Donnie. And she said one night they had finished loading up a steamboat going to Georgetown. It was loaded with turpentine. It was loaded with lumber, everything. and Mr. Don came home. He was tired. He went to bed. She said he was awoken. The house was by all kind of stuff on the door, and they came running up and said, the steamboat is on fire. It's burning. It's going to be all burnt up, the cargo. And Miss Georgie said, the man that never said anything was running around trying to put his breeches on and his clothes. And he says, 'tis to me, a man up a tree. And she would tell that story on him for years. So this is a little grandpa story. Now I'm going to go back up in time a little bit. I escaped Conway when I got a driver's license. I went to work at the Myrtle Beach Farms Company office. It was in the Chapin Company building. And it was a long, narrow thing. By it was the post office and then the Chapin Company. And if you remember that building, the way it was, Mr. Chapin, Mr. Simeon, had a lot to say about how that building was designed. You remember how pretty it was? It was ahead of its time. And the only thing that messed it up in some people's mind was when Potty Brown built Mount Atlanticus, and it took some of the work down. But that old building was there, and I would drive over there and go to work. I reported to Miss Hughes and Miss Skews, and then they assigned a fella to be in charge of us by the name of John Ed Copeland. And everybody that worked there was, in the summer, were temporaries, we call them. We would work there and go back to school. Our job in those days was to count the tickets at the rides. We would get money, we would roll it up, count it. Some money would be put in the bank, some would be made as banks to operate and sent back down to the pavilion. And we could get out of there when we finished our job. So John Ed wanted us all to hurry along so we could go out and do our thing. Occasionally, Mr. Houston would walk in. He would go in the back. He would speak to us nicely that worked there. He was a very polite man. And sometimes Mr. Don would be back there. You'd smell his pipe, as I said. Sometimes Mr. Bellamy, Howell Bellamy Sr. would come in, Miss Patterson and others, and they would meet in the back and conduct their business and do what they did. We did our work and got out. In those days, all the men folks covered themselves with a cologne. It stunk. And that place smelled just like it. John Ed covered himself with it. I did, all the men, and we would go eat lunch. We'd get off and go to work. John Ed would head up on the north end a lot. At my age, he was a little ahead of us, so I'd have to go back to Conway. I'd go find someone I'd talk with to get a date to go to the beach, and I would have to go see their mama and daddy and explain to them where I was going and what time to come in. It was very safe to go to the Pavilion. It was the safest place in Myrtle Beach. We could go there, and the parents didn't mind if you went there, take your daughter. We would go ride the rides. We would walk around, hold hands, kind of like what Wayne was talking about. Sometimes a little more maybe, but that was the Pavilion. We would go upstairs, we would have a good time, we would go eat popcorn, do all the things you would do in high school. And our parents would let us go. We would ride the rides, do whatever. But sometimes you would say that you were going to the Pavilion and you might not go there. You might you might go by the Goose Girl in Conway and get a half pint of vodka because the vodka was not supposed to have a smell. I think Mabel and Jimmy, which is what I call my mama and daddy and others, knew exactly what was going on, but a half pint from the Goose Girl was exciting, and we might slip over and go to the Bowery. We might have a beer or two. We might see Bouncing Betty. Y'all know about Bouncing Betty? She was suspended. There was a harness around her. And Bouncing Betty was from Myrtle's Inlet. I think her name was Betty Bloom. She was a rather large lady, but she would get into the harness and do the go-go dancing, and she could kick it and spin up, and her feet would be on the ceiling. And she would do upside-down go-go dancing. And most fun of all was watching Don't Cry Joe. He could carry so many beers, and every now and then he would drop one, but that was rare. They had some music over there. Sometimes there would be shag music, but there was a band there that was getting started. Didn't have too much shag. It turned out to be Alabama. But we would go there some nights. Some nights we would go up and hear the Tams at the Beach Club, go to Sonny's. But we would always use the Pavilion as an alibi. So I worked there, and I went out at night. I escaped Conway. Usually when I would go by the clock in Conway, I'd light up a Winston. I didn't think Mabel and Jimmy knew I was smoking. I got reported one day. But anyway, time goes on. I graduated from working for Miss Hughes and Miss Hughes. I was in college now, and things were much better. They sent me to work at the Pavilion office. I reported to Mr. Cato. The Pavilion office was upstairs, right at the dance hall, where the ticket office was. And Mr. Cato was in charge of that operation. And again, we had summer people. We had Brenda. Mr. Cato was there. He would direct us. Linda Vereen was working there at the time. Sometimes her sister was there. And we would do things. We would work, get reports ready. Mr. Houston would come in. He would conduct his business. And Mr. Houston, when he walked in, he always had creased pants on, a shirt that was buttoned. And he was as fresh and as nice and clean as you would ever see. And he worked all day long at that Pavilion, and everyone respected Earl Houston. Sometime during the day, he would leave and go for lunch. We would be doing our work, and we hated to see him leave. He was part of the thing, but when he left, we kind of broke bad a little bit. We had a little mischief and fun. We would work and would have a good day. Finally, Mr. Houston let me start working in the dance hall at night. And that was good. He let me pull 2 shifts, the morning and at night at the dance hall. Now I've kind of set the stage a little bit for you. Now I'm going to go back. I'm talking to Mabel and Jimmy. I said, I'm going to leave, going to report to work. I'm going to see Mr. Cato. I've got some friends coming in, fraternity brothers, and they've got a house down at North Myrtle Beach, so I'm going to spend the night. And maybe 2 nights, so I won't be home. Mabel would kind of crack a little smile, a little bit. Then she would toughen up. My father, Jimmy, would smile. I would get in the car. I would head out of town. And this is a day that I want to talk about, and it involves a lot of folks. I left Conway as usual, lit up the cigarette, going on 501. I was thinking about today. Here's Raymond, my college roommate, coming down. He's got a job tonight. Every now and then when he comes to the beach to make a hustle, he would go to Sloppy Joe's, and he would win a TV, a dog, or whatever. And he would leave. They would put it in the car, and he would drive around to the back, and they would unload it and put it out. That was part of the Sloppy Joe operation. So Raymond was coming down. He was going there that night, and I was thinking about all the other stuff. Tonight we got the Catalinas playing at the Pavilion. That was one of the top bands that we had. Those people had horns, drums. They played beach music. They had clean hair and bodies. They had nice suits, and they had a little act, and they would do things. And it was wonderful. And they sang shag music. And we were in for a wonderful evening of good music, a great band, and I was so excited. It was going to be perfect, and I was going to be out on the town. Sometimes at the Pavilion, when you would get off work, all kind of things happen. You might go to what we call the teddy bear #1. Anybody remember the teddy bear? Huh? Who all? I know 2 or 3 in here that hadn't raised their hand that went to the teddy bear. There's another one. But we would get off work. Some of the people in the rides that worked there would get off. There might be, well, I'm not going to mention all the names. A couple are in the room. But you would go to the teddy bear and have a lot of fun. One night, Mr. Houston's right-hand man, Mr. Floyd, went out to the teddy bear #1 and had a good time. I won't say who all was out there that night, but after they left the teddy bear, they came back to the Pavilion. Just a little bit south of the bathhouse was a high dive act. It went way up in there. The Kaler brothers operated it, and they had several shows a day. 1 level, 2 level, and 3 levels. And that highest level was way up there. And there was a little shallow pool. But the secret to the pool was underneath it there was a lot of straw and all. So when they jumped in, they would get into straw. But that night, after the teddy bear #2, Larry Floyd and some more went there and decided to go diving. And somehow or another, Double E, as we called him behind his back, Mr. Houston, heard about this. This was not a good event. Things got real quiet, and there was no more leaving the teddy bear #2 and leaping off the high dive. But I was studying on that as I was driving to work, and I was thinking about the songs we might hear, My Girl, If I Didn't Have a Dime, If I Didn't Take the Time. I was thinking about all that good shag music we were going to hear and how good it was going to be. I finally get over there, and I park my car. I start walking through the parking lot. You're supposed to park as far away as you can. If you worked at the Pavilion in those days, you get way back, so the parking would be for your guests. As I got into the park and past the roller coaster, I looked over there and there was Howard Joe, Mr. Glisson, and Mike Hope, all three of them headed towards, I guess it might be the Scrambler or something over there, but when you saw those three gentlemen go into a ride, there was trouble. Mr. Yo was in charge of the rides over there. He came back from the early days when the Pavilion was first created. He was there. And I looked, and they were going over there, and as I looked to my right, they were taking the covers off the organ, getting it ready for the day. And I kept walking, and the merry-go-round, they'd taken the covers off of it, and there was Ed Fanjoy over there. He was painting on one of the characters on the merry-go-round. Apparently it had been damaged to something like that, so he was over there working on those. The Fanjoys always did our signs at the Pavilion, and they knew how to take care of the horses. Now, most people call that thing a merry-go-round, but in the carny vernacular, the merry-go-round was really called a menagerie. Is that right, Rich? A merry-go-round usually had horses on it. A menagerie had dragons. It had horses. It had all kind of things. And ours was one of the finest in the world. And it was well taken care of. I got a little further along, and I looked over there, and there was Johnny Butler. He was over there at the Ferris wheel. And I'd heard a little rumor about him. And I said, Johnny, is there any truth to the story that you fell asleep while running the Ferris wheel? And people rode and rode and rode until they woke you up. He didn't deny it. There was all kind of things that happened at the Pavilion. I kept on walking. I crossed the street. I went up to the ice cream stand. It really wasn't ice cream. It was called frozen custard, better than ice cream. Archie Future was there, getting it all prepared, ready to go. And I kept on walking. And there was Kathleen Macklin over there getting the snowballs ready to go. She was a local lady, a great lady. I looked over there, and there was Mr. Don over there, and Mr. Houston's brother, getting the corn dogs and all that stuff, the mustard ready. The only person that may have his secret recipe, I think, is sitting back there, Mr. Butler. But that recipe was the best we ever had. I looked over a little to my left, and there was the jukebox-looking thing with a live chicken in it. The chicken wasn't in it yet, but if you put some money in that thing, the chicken would get out and dance and all that, and it worked great till the chicken got full. Then you had to rotate the chicken, and we didn't keep that too long, but that was there. I kept on walking, and I looked over at the shooting gallery. There's Red Richardson trying to get the guns going. We had compressed air guns with little pellets in it. You had to wash those in kerosene, load the tubes. They had gotten jammed, so Red was getting that fixed. I looked out through the doors. The doors were open. You could see the ocean. It was kind of calm out there. And I went over to the soda fountain to get me a coffee. I checked the clock when I walked through the park, and I got there a little early. I guess I was excited about the night ahead, so I had about 30 minutes to kill. I got my coffee, and I talked to several of the police officers. In the early days of the Pavilion, that street outside the Pavilion was loaded with police cars. There was policemen there 24 hours a day. And we had 3 MPs at least that were there all day and at night from the Air Force Base. We had a lot of law enforcement. But anyway, I talked to a couple of the officers. And I looked at the grill, and there was Whaley O'Quinn. He was one of the best people on a grill you'd ever seen. He was scraping it down, getting it ready to go, seasoning the grill. And there was Russ Roberts, part of the Ainer Mafia. We had Russ Roberts, Donald and David Squires. They all escaped Ainer and the tobacco business to come work at the Pavilion in the summers. And they worked the grills and other things, and they were hard at work. I looked over there, and there's Julius Holmes. He was up on the tube a little while ago and screamed. Julius was working. I saw him. I walked outside. The first thing I would do in the mornings, if I had time, I'd go to the telephone booth. There was a whole line of them. And the first thing you do is check to see if there was any money in them. Somebody had already beat me to it that day. There wasn't any cell phones, but everybody checked those. I don't care who they were, they'd hit those phones. I looked across the street, and there was the corner tavern, the keg. There wasn't much going on there that time of day, but there was little activity, nothing at the keg. And I looked over there at the Bowery, the 8th wonder of the world, the best place at the beach in many ways. And there was a beer truck over there. There was Spud Spadoni unloading Budweiser, taking it in. In those days, he worked for, God, I'm having a little brain thing. Not Mr. Giannis, but Mr. Stanko. He worked for Mr. Stanko, and he was riding a truck, and he was taking the beer in for him to get that thing going. My next thing was to look quickly over at Peach's Corner in hopes of seeing Eunice Burroughs. Eunice and Johnny ran that place, and she was the prettiest woman in Myrtle Beach. She looked like Elizabeth Taylor. Everybody wanted to see Eunice. But there wasn't much going on over there. I looked over at Sloppy Joe's. No activity, the lights wasn't really going. I got to thinking about the chicken in the jukebox. Then I thought about what happened down at the Plowers. They had a gorilla, a female gorilla. They call her Princess Josephine. And it was the biggest animal in Myrtle Beach. And it was having a good life until Buzzy got inside the cage and got locked up in there. That set off Justin Plyler and Eloise. I think Kay got a little laughter out of it, but the princess was soon to leave. Eloise kind of had the top hand at that time at the Gay Dolphin. The Gay Dolphin had great rides, and they had a big coaster at one time. Someone got hurt and they took it out. But that was a family downtown. Victor Sharma and his crowd, and the Bowery, Dick Lair, Mr. Houston, all the people that worked there. It was an unusual place. Across the street, you had all kind of things going on. But anyway, I had my little walk. I said, well, I better get up to work and see Mr. Cato. I decided not to walk up the stairs where the bathrooms were. I'd cleaned those enough when Mr. Houston got me started there. I wanted to go walk out by the flagpole and see what was going on there. I had time. I looked up at the clock. I still had a little time. The next thing I saw was Roddy Rook. He ran the bathhouse, and he was very much in charge, and something disturbed him down on the beach. I don't know what it was. It might have been Skeeter Nash doing something wrong, or setting up the stand. But Roddy, when he was upset, he'd sit back like that and look and had a stern look. And so I think Skeeter or somebody was catching the hard time, and I just looked to see the show. I looked over there, and there was the jukebox. It was locked up. It would be opened up pretty soon, but a little early. But the jukebox took in a lot of money, and it was all shag music, and it was good. I went over and walked up the other steps and got on top of the pavilion. I looked over there where the high rise was. I was thinking, Lord, have mercy. Larry Floyd and all that crowd that got in trouble that night are going to pay for it dearly. I looked over at the Seaside Cafeteria. I looked at the Seaside Restaurant. I thought I could smell the Krispy Kreme donuts. Albert Neal had a Krispy Kreme down the way towards Chesterfield. Those things were so good, particularly if you had a hangover. But this was off to a good day. I was excited. I go in there with Mr. Cato, and we get our work done. And just like at the old Pavilion offices, when you finish your work, you're done. Mr. Houston came in, everything was good. So I left. I was excited about the night and all the good things, the band that was going on. I didn't know if I was going anyway, probably to North Myrtle Beach. Might go to Teddy Bear, I don't know. But anyway, the Catalinas were playing that night, so all the doors on the side of the pavilion were closed. They were practicing. They'd set up their equipment, and they were making some good sounds and getting the mic set up, the speakers. Everything was good. And about that time, you know, it was good. Mr. Houston came in. He wanted to see if everything was fine. It was. He left. So we getting close to opening time. The ticket sellers came in. We had 2 or 3 policemen that we paid at night to come up there. Mr. Thorpe was one of them. We had several, but he was a great person. He was a retired police officer. Mr. Cooper would come up at times, but they would sit right there at the door to make sure no liquor got into place and there would be no trouble. So we started selling tickets. We looked like we were going to have a good crowd. I went and checked the bathrooms because Mr. Houston, when he got back, he was going to check them. He wanted to make sure every bathroom was clean and spotless. So here we go. The music starts to play. The lights dim. The doors are open. We got a nice breeze. The crowd is building up. And the dance floor starts to fill up, and things are moving on. I look over, look behind my back towards the ticket office, and in comes Skeeter Nash. He has left the beach service. He's gone home and cleaned up. He has his khaki pants on. He has his Weegens that's shining. He has a belt buckle fastened on the front. One of these shirts, gants, or whatever. Everybody had to have one. He had his cologne on. What was that called? English leather? And he had a little sweater tied over him, looked like Superman. And he was coming in. The radar was going. He was looking and searching. The crowd got bigger. People were dancing and carrying on, and it was a good night. Our ticket sales were great. It was real busy, and things were going good. The music was good. And I decided to take a break. I walked out the exit door on the street side to like near Marlboro, Winston, whatever it was. And I looked down, and it was going. Sloppy Joe's was going, the lights were on, people were in there. The corner, Peach's Corner, was loaded. There was all kind of people standing. The corner tavern was full. The keg lights were on. It looked like an army of police officers down there, MPs. About that time, there was a terrible noise, a roar. You could hear it coming out of the Bowery. There was a fight. It was a roar. And about that time, a great big old tall policeman started walking that way. He went in his car and he picked out a stick. That was John Henry Brown. Some of us remember him. He was a big man. He walked in the door, and the noise got quieter and quieter and quieter. And about that time, out on the door closest to the ocean, here he comes. He's got 3 people with him. And 2 or 3 of the officers just kind of get up. They go over to John Henry, they get these people, they put them in the car, and they're gone. They're gone. They're going up to see the jail. There was no trouble around the pavilion in those days. It was not tolerated. People would drop their daughters off at the pavilion under the marquee. They would come upstairs and go to the dance hall. There was no trouble. It was not tolerated. The pavilion never sold any alcohol, and they didn't tolerate it being there. Not that it was a bad thing, but we didn't want it in the business model. We never had trouble. You could drop your children off in the rides and tell them, we're going to pick you up at the Oregon at such and such a time. The parents would pick them up or meet them at the merry-go-round. It was the safest place, the whole downtown was. And it was a wonderful, wonderful place. Now, how did this building get there? How was it built and why? Who designed this thing? In 1938, the old wooden pavilion burnt. You got to go back in time. You got to go back in time. The Depression was just beginning to ease up. It was hard times in this place. That thing burnt to the ground. A lot going on. The board of directors in the company in those days had a lot on their mind, and they had a great management team. That management team they had was Mr. Bryan Sr., Mr. Bryan Jr. Those 2 fellows were like the Doug Wendells, the Jim Apples, the Rosenbergs of their day. They helped at Burroughs Collins, and when Myrtle Beach Farms was put together, they ran things. They would bring ideas to the board. The board at that time was a time when it was turning over. Things really began to come to focus in 1944. Mr. Chapin Sr., we call him Sam, or he was called Sam, I wasn't there. His son, Sam Jr., were on the board, the Bryans. Mr. Frank had just retired. Mr. Don was there, as I call Pa, and Edward, E.E. They were on the board. Think about 1944 in Myrtle Beach. At night, you would see the tankers burning in the ocean where the U-boats were setting them on fire. Where the airport is now was the Army Air Corps base. There was a German prisoner of war camp in Myrtle Beach. Think about all this. Up there where the Maison Samir and all that was a range, a target range where the planes would shoot at targets. All that had lots of bullets in it. There was a bombing range on the other side of the waterway. A lot going on. They got to thinking about what can we do. And Mr. Chapin, as I mentioned earlier before, when you look at the old Chapin Company building, Mr. Chapin and Mr. Bryan really worked hard on coming up with what we all familiar with. The object of the game to start with was to have a fireproof building because everything had been burnt. So Mr. Bryan got with an architect, Mr. Cooney, and they worked diligently with the Chapins and the board members to come up with a plan. Also, through the years, the Pavilion had carnivals coming through in the summer. One of the problems was they were not consistent. So the Bryans came up with the idea and presented it to the board that we get a permanent carnival. And they contacted, they had seen many carnivals come and go at the beach. But the one that seemed to be the best was the one that Mr. Beach had, Harry Beach. It was called Central Amusement. And a carnival was a very mobile thing. Everything was on wheels. And they structured a deal and brought it to the board where Mr. Beach's carnival would be there and it would be a joint venture. And Myrtle Beach Farms had the ability to buy Mr. Beach out. So while all that was going on, Mr. Cooney was working on the plans, the Bryans, and Mr. Earl Husted, who worked with the Carnival Central for Mr. Beach, he and Mr. Yo and others will work with Mr. Cooney and laid out what we see is the floor plan for the pavilion that you see now, where the soda fountains, number 1, number 2, and other concessions that go to make sure the electrical and the plumbing was there. It was all concrete and steel. And the Chapins had so much to do with it. They had been in New York, Chicago. Mr. Chapin had offices in Chicago. He had offices in New York. He was on the stock exchange. He ran around with the likes of Mr. Morton Salt, Wrigley's, Mr. Wrigley. I mean, he was used to every kind of entertainment venue there was. So you put all this up and you shake it out in the bag and you see the pavilion that you see or did see. And originally, the upstairs was to be used as a auditorium with floor shows, as we call them, but they were variety shows. A lot of Mr. Aker was the master of ceremonies, and we had juggling, we had singing, all the kind of things you see really when it started on like Ed Sullivan's show and all that. That's kind of one thing that helped change the original purpose. TV kind of killed what we were doing upstairs. So times have to change, so we went to different venues like music. We had all types of music. And one of the best ones that I liked was the wrestling matches. It would tickle me because you would have like 8 teams playing or 8 tag teams going. There really wasn't but 3. They would change mask, outfits, and all that. And they would tell the people working at the pavilion that were selling the drinks to please stand by this corner of the ring at a certain time because Mogul was going to pick this up and throw it on there. They paid us for those drinks, but it was all part of the show. As time went on, the music got more and more, and it turned into what we called a dance hall. There was a change that came in our company. We changed the way we did things. We put a retirement age in. That's one reason I'm here tonight. We changed it so people couldn't work forever. And we went through a transition period. It was very difficult. We changed the companies. There was Burroughs Collins, and there was Myrtle Beach Farms. We merged those 2 companies to make Burroughs Chapin. And in that time, we did a lot of changing. We decided to go back to outside management like we did in the early days when the Bryans were there. We just changed our way of doing business. At that particular time, we brought a new leader in. His name was Doug Wendell. And people were asked to retire and move out. Some family members, other people. It fell my lot to have to tell a lot of them it was time to go. The hardest thing I think I ever had to do was to go in there and talk to Earl Houston and tell him it was time to retire. It broke my heart. When I got to his office, I looked in there and Mr. Houston knew what I was coming in for. He looked at me and said, I was wondering when it was my turn. And we embraced each other. We cried, and he patted me on the back, and I patted him, and it was time for a change. Mr. Wendell got there. We got some more talent that came in. There was Mr. Zekman. There was Mr. Hare. There was Alan Cantor. It was a new day. And we had Mr. Wendell doing like the Bryans did, bringing plans back to the board. And we were going to expand the pavilion. And we did. Under their leadership, Mr. Wendell's, Mr. Zekman, we started adding rides, building things. It was very impressive. We talked with the city of Myrtle Beach. They wanted to expand the convention center, and so we swapped 18 acres of land for them to expand the center. We got Chester Street and kept going. Y'all, Zekman, here, counter. They got a fellow named Ira West to design the new park. He was one of the people that did Disney, all of their operations, park design. Things were really moving. We built the parking deck. Had water slides come in, huge ones. Removed the swings to where Chester Street was. And things were really rolling. This operation that Zekman, Mr. Hare, Cantor, Mr. Wendell put together really attracted a lot of attention. It was so good and doing so well. We were recruited by New Orleans to build a park down in New Orleans with all type of incentives to go in there. There was a couple of my friends that I went to school with, Paul McElhaney, that they made Tabasco sauce, and Mr. Ingersoll Jordan, they were in the shipping business. They kind of called us aside one day while all this was going on, and they said, y'all really don't need to come to New Orleans. Y'all wouldn't do well down here. You don't understand the local politics. And it was good advice. We didn't do it. But the park was really rolling. In those days, the Pavilion was our revenue source at Burroughs Chapin Company. It was so important. And it was huge. Some things started to happen. The Myrtle Beach Air Force Base closed. I think that was in '93. That was when times beginning to change. And we lost our MPs. A lot of jobs were lost, a lot of the help at the Pavilion. And the neighborhood began to change a little bit. And as time went on, the crowd downtown changed. We've been told many times, you know, y'all closed the Pavilion. You really hurt Myrtle Beach, but we closed it because we had to. It was not making money, it was a drain, and we had no choice. But the crowd downtown changed. The people that started coming were different. They were a rough crowd. There was not as much law down there, law enforcement. We tried to restrict it, keep the rough crowd out with putting up gated admissions. That just didn't work. So Rich, he worked as hard as he could, everybody did, to make that thing work. But the crowd that took over downtown, the stores that opened downtown, they were not taffy shops anymore, where you had the machines twirling, making taffy. They were adult merchandise, and it just changed. So we had to close them. And it was a sad day, and really sad. But those are kind of where it started, with the fire, the new building, how we got into the carnival business. The people that worked at the Pavilion were mostly people in the community, part-time jobs. It was an integral part of Myrtle Beach. And I want to make sure everyone in the room tonight understands I'm no longer on the board at Burroughs Chapin. These retirement policies and things we put in are good. They sent me out to pasture where I belong. So what I'm saying here tonight is not something that's been authorized by the board. They bumped me out. But these are things that, I've observed and seen. And one of the questions that I'm always asked about, well, what should go where the pavilion is? I don't really have to worry about it. I'm not on the board. I'm not an elected official with the city. So I can kind of say what I want to say, and somebody might throw something at me, but I don't think, it doesn't hurt me. But I want to be very clear, I'm not speaking for Burroughs Chapin tonight. Debbie, you here, our chair lady, right? I'm kaput, out. This is our chairperson. Now, why did the pavilion collapse? I told you, the downtown changed. It really did. I think the city started looking out at the air base, which they had to do, and they redeveloped it, and it's a wonderful place. But for a while, the focus went out there instead of both places, I think. Anyway, it happened. Now, the question is, what goes there next? Everybody's got something, they want to see at the pavilion, and I'm going to tell you mine. If I had a little magic wand, this would happen. One time, Mr. Patterson, with the Ripley's crowd, he came up to me and said, I wish the city would let me put a monorail system in. It would run by the motels and down at the pavilion. It would go to the convention center. It would go out to Broadway at the beach, by the baseball place. He said, I never got any traction, and I don't know. But I've got that in the back of my mind, a monorail. And then one time, John Rhodes came to see me, and we met in the office, and I said, what we're talking about today, John, is something, what have we done? Is the city mad with us or what? Our relationship with the city is sometimes tenuous, which it's okay, that's part of it. And he laughed, he said, no, this is not the city. He said, I wanted to talk with you about where the old Myrtle Square Mall went. And I said, in the city, what's this about? He said, well, there's an investment group, and he said, I think I'm going to be part of it. It's some Chinese. And we just think of looking for a place. And he said, what would you think if we came and asked about putting up a great big, like a place where music could play, and like an outdoor thing, amphitheater, and have all kind of stuff there, and we could have car shows and all this. It'd be a community place, and he really talked about it. I mean, it got me fascinated. And I said, well, I thought they were going to build an amphitheater on that land y'all got from us when we were doing Broadway. And he said, no, the city's not going to do that. We're thinking about sport, entertainment, he was a leader. He hit that early on, for young sports, tourism, and they're doing it all over in North Myrtle Beach, and he was right on target. He said, the city's going to probably do that. And he said, well, what do you think about it? I said, John, to be honest with you, I think it's a great idea, but if you're involved with it and you're the mayor, it's going to cause you problems and us problems, in my estimation. But you need to go see Mr. Wendell and those people, not me. But I'm going to tell you, I was on the board at this time. I said, I'm going to be against it because of your position with the city. I think it's a great idea, but I think you'd hurt yourself and the city, but I like the idea. And he called me back later. He said, well, we might do something like that out where the old pottery was. But I've never forgot what John said. It just stuck in my head. So if I waved a little wand, I would get John Rhodes' idea. I would have a great venue where bands could play like they're doing now at the Pavilion, but it would be elevated. It would be one level above the street. We would preserve the front that Mr. Chapin and all of them so wanted, the benches, where the flagpole and the jukebox was. All this would be on top. Underneath this, all the way back to where the city's doing such a fabulous job of redoing, would be an open. So if you were downtown, you could actually maybe see the ocean a little bit, but you could walk down there. There would be shops and venues, no adult stores. There would be a heavy police presence down below, walkways. Up top, we would have concerts like we're doing today, but we would preserve the bottom. And in the old days, when Rich and all of them ran it, we had every kind of community function, everything. And we would do that down underneath this. We would have the old ice skating rink that the city had. We used to have it up there at the parking deck. We would have it underneath there. The greatest yard sale, that was one of your deals. And in Myrtle Beach, all type of civic functions, but it would be on ground level. Above it would be this other massive amphitheater, like you see out in Denver and places. Now that's my magic wand tonight. This gentleman right here, Rich here, he and Zeckman and all of them, Doug Wendell, myself, when that thing was closed down, Lisa cried. Everybody in our family and the Chapin family shed a tear. As I said in that thing tonight you saw earlier, I think it's sacred ground. It would be a shame to put a baseball stadium there to me. It's got to be, Bo told me one time, he said, if something needs to go there, it's epic. It's, we can't do an Eiffel Tower. That's been done. But we need to do something unique. It's going to take the city. It's going to take a master plan. But anyway, I think we've gone from the beginning to the end in a dream. Now, are there any questions that we could have? Any questions?
No questions? What? I
No
know you
questions?
people. I know you guys. I know you have questions. Anybody have any questions for Egerton?
I think they want to get out here and go have a toddy.
Well, you set the stage for that. Yes, you've got us all thinking about it. We want to thank, by the way, Victor Shama for bringing us this beautiful rendering. Victor, thank you, Victor and Peter McIntyre, for making this happen. And by the way, Peter was an old Ripley's guy who worked at the Bowery, and of course, Victor is still at the Bowery. And so we thank you both so very much for putting this up here for us. Yes, Bo?
My question to Egerton is, if you had to you got a microphone. This is not a Rockefeller question, by the way. This is top drawer, okay? Egerton, is this on?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. If you had to pinpoint or choose one ingredient for the underlying ingredient for Myrtle Beach's success since its inception, since before mankind was here, beginning at that point when it was nothing but pine trees. Can you pinpoint one or two or three ingredients that came together to create the magical thing that's happened here? I mean, this is a brand new place. It's only been here 100 years. And I just wonder what your take on that.
To me, the backbone of Myrtle Beach has been the family business, children and families. From day one, when this whale washed up on the beach, people came over, families. It's been a family place. I hope it can stay that way. Family venues, children coming here, have really what's re-nourished things by them coming back and their children and family experiences. To me, it's family. If we can keep it a family place, a place where people can come and be safe and walk the streets and drive around and not be scared. Family environment.
Built on family, for sure. Yes. There's a microphone coming at you.
I want to first thank Burroughs and Chapin's for giving us all a life here. Everything you talked about brought back memories to me. I had my first paying job in 1957. My friend Jack Thompson taking pictures for Dwight Lamb in the front left corner of the Pavilion. The next 2 summers, I went to the bathhouse and then to the lifeguard, but I worked every night upstairs in the dance hall, taking up tickets, selling tickets. So everything you talked about really brought back memories. But the most wonderful thing that happened to me up there is in June of 1961, my sweetheart asked me to dance, and of course she denies it, and she always appreciates me bringing it, but she did, and we've now, in August, will be married 60 years, all because of, and my friend Johnny Butler, one night, she was there, and I didn't know it, and Johnny punched me, and he said, "I think that's Penny Hulls over there." And sure enough, it was. So everybody, every name you brought up, Jack Jackson, all those people meant something. And we were so thankful to Burroughs and Chapin's for the safe place. And you mentioned people used to drop their 10-year-old kids off and give them $1 and they could ride rides for an hour and come back and get them later. And you can't do that anywhere today. No. So thank you for memories.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
And I guess most of you know that was Buddy Stiers, who, of course, pretty much orchestrated the opening of the Market Common when the Air Force Base closed. So you learned a lot at the Pavilion, Buddy. Thank you. Yes, dear.
Hello. How have you overcome all of your challenges and managed to move your family's lineage through the age with such grace?
All right.
These are loaded questions, Egerton.
Yeah. Well, the good news is our family is a great family. The Chapin family is a great family. We've all hung together. We will fight, bump heads like every family does. That's what a family is. But we're all unified in our own way. We've had hard times and good times, but we've always stood together. Now, we'll fuss on one another, but we hang tight when we need to be. And it's been a joy for me participating in the good times and the bad. Really. And now other people got that load on their back, not me. Thank you.
Any other questions? Before we go to that question, I do want to introduce Ann. Ann, just stand up and take a bow. This is Egerton's wife, Ann.
I would like to introduce his office wife, who's been with him for how many years now?
Cheryl, where's Cheryl? Cheryl, Egerton's office wife. Go ahead, Cheryl, take a bow. You deserve
Cheryl has taken care of Egerton
Yes.
their entire adult life, both of them. And I thank you, Keith, for putting up with her. She's my guardian angel, and you are too.
Love you.
Thank you, Ann, and thank you, Cheryl. Okay, our friend there has a question, Martina.
Egerton, I just want to thank you. I worked at the Pavilion as a kid, and I think there's some other folks in here that might have worked at the Pavilion. Yes? How many of you worked at the Pavilion? Best job I ever had as a kid. Dad was in the Air Force. I was able to ride my bicycle from the Air Force Base to work at the Pavilion for about 3 years. All the great people were there. Mr. Husted was there. Mike Holt was there, and all the greats. And it was just a wonderful job. And I just wanted to let you know, my job was to run the Flying Bobs and the Swiss Bobs in the Himalaya. And I was a guy that would ask people if they wanted to go faster. And I was also the kid in school that was accused of talking too much. But amazing, after the many years, I ended up working at local radio stations and left the market here and worked in big cities and stuff. And to this day, I still do public speaking. And it all started because of that great opportunity at the Pavilion. So I want to thank you and the Chapin family for the great memories. Thank you very much.
Well, we
Hey.
thank you.
How nice. How nice. Any other questions? Well, I can tell you. Oh, there is somebody in the back? Oh, yes, okay. We're coming there. Get in the microphone right now.
Is it open? My good friend Egerton Burroughs, that was him over there, and I saw him about 2 weeks ago, and he said, "You don't know who I am?" I said, "Where's the other half of you?" And anyway, the one thing you did forget, the beer truck driver, I've been here all my life, no, not yet. The beer truck driver's daughter, he married Mr. Stanko's daughter, right?
That's right.
Brenda Bethune is now the mayor, son is daughter of Myrtle Beach. How about the clap? Thank you. I'm going back to Myrtle's in it. Egerton, I'm the mayor now. Unofficial mayor. Y'all come to Drunken Jack's and eat.
Anything else? Anybody? Okay, just remember that the videos, the chairman's cut of the Pavilion video that was done on the closing day of the Pavilion in 2006 is available in the lobby. And if for any reason you do not get one tonight, just know that the Chapin Library will have them on sale from here on out. And needless to say, it all benefits the Chapin Memorial Library. Let's hear it for Egerton Burroughs.
Thank you. Thank you, lady. Another good night.
Thank you, Egerton. We all love you very, very much.
Thank you. Been good.
And we thank you for all you've done for Conway and Myrtle Beach.
Well, it's all good people, and I'm just glad to be part of the good crowd.
All right. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. God bless all of you. We'll see you at the next event sponsored by the Chapin Memorial Library.